Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, Accessibility Matters, Enhancing Higher Ed Events for Everyone. The fact that so many of you are here underscores the significance of this topic and the importance for all of us getting it right. My name is Susan Summerlin Nye. I lead our K-20 marketing efforts here at Cvent, and I'll be your moderator for this webinar. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Stephen Cutchins, our Senior Manager of Accessibility, who with more than 20 years of accessibility work experience and a personal passion for this topic will guide us through today's presentation. We also have ASL interpreters, Dean and Janine. Thank you both for being here as well. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Stephen's going to be presenting for about the next 45 minutes. During that time, we encourage you to be as interactive as possible. Please go ahead and comment, share your thoughts, ask questions. To do so, you can use the tools on the right side of your screen. You can join the chat. Feel free to jump in and say hi to us now. Let us know where you're from. We'll also be taking and answering all questions throughout the presentation in the written Q&A area on the right. And please feel free to upvote any questions that you find particularly interesting, as that will really help us make sure that we are answering those questions that are most top of mind for you. Finally, you'll find a copy of this slide deck under the resources section on the right. Okay, so let's get into the presentation. To start, I'd like to hear from you. Please answer the following poll question and tell us where you fall within your university. Are you within the Accessibility Disability Department, Enrollment Services, Academic Affairs, Student Services, Alumni and Advancement, University Events, or something else? If you find that other is the best answer for you, please go into the chat and just let us know what organization you're from and which department that you represent. While you're responding, I'll go ahead and take a quick look at today's agenda. Stephen's going to kick off our session by level setting what the terms disability and accessibility mean. The bulk of our time, though, is going to be spent exploring the different disability categories: visual, hearing, physical, speech, language, mental health, intellectual, and learning disabilities. For each one of these, Stephen is going to be covering essential insights and event planning tips to keep in mind. Finally, we will touch on Cvent's approach to accessibility and the steps that we take to ensure our platform is highly accessible. Stephen, over to you.
Since we're going to spend, almost an hour together, I might as well let you know a little bit about me and why I'm so passionate about accessibility and helping people with disabilities. My mother was an amputee. She lost her leg to cancer when I was very young. I remember doing things like holding the doors at the grocery store for, this was before the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, was passed. So, they didn't have automatic doors way back then. She passed away when I was 7. So I would spend a couple of weeks every summer with my aunt and uncle, who had 2 kids with cerebral palsy, both of them in wheelchairs. One was nonverbal. They would bring me along to summer vacations, which was pretty much always Disney. I mean, if you think about wheelchair accessible places in the 70s and the early 80s, it was Disney or it was nothing. I also have a neurological disorder called Tourette syndrome. You may notice my various motor tics and twitches. Most know Tourette's because of something called coprolalia. It's where people may excessively or uncontrollably make like vocal sounds or use inappropriate language. Only about 10% of people with Tourette's actually have coprolalia. I don't. Rather disappointingly, Tourette's has the highest level of bias by hiring managers. They think that everyone with Tourette's also has coprolalia. In a survey, over 30% of hiring managers admitted to not being willing to hire someone with Tourette's, to not be willing to hire me. So all of these are reasons why I've dedicated my career now for 20 plus years to helping people with disabilities, and I've loved every minute of it. For personal life, I think we don't talk about personal enough at work, and I like it. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I was a paratrooper in the Army. I was a rock climber. I even competed. That picture isn't me, but you get the idea. I was a motorcycle racer. That picture actually is me, that one in there in the center. I tried to get my kids into motorcycling, but it never really stuck. That's okay, because crashing stinks. My son now plays soccer. My daughter now plays volleyball. So I spend most of the time riding and actually now racing bicycles. That on the right is a podium. I was in 3rd place. I wish I had a 1st place, but you know, maybe next year. So what is disability? Before we talk about accessibility or digital accessibility, which is why we're here, let's spend a minute talking about disabilities, because it's something, it's difficult to understand one without first understanding the other. A disability is a condition of the body or mind that makes it more difficult for someone to do certain activities or interact with the world around them. We tend to think about the big disabilities, things like I'm fully blind, I'm fully deaf. But what about things like learning? This is higher ed after all. Learning, remembering, mental illness, mental health. Although, and I quote, people with disabilities sometimes refers to a single population, it's actually a diverse group of people with a wide range of needs. 2 people with the same type of disability can be affected in very different ways. Some disabilities may be hidden or not easy to notice. According to the World Health Organization, the 3 dimensions of disability are impairment, such as loss of vision, activity limitations, such as difficulty walking, and participation restrictions that inhibit social interactions and recreational activities, things like attending events. So what is accessibility? Accessibility is merely making our electronic content, our websites, our software programs work for people with disabilities, regardless of their limitations, often by use of something called assistive technology. Assistive technology, commonly just we say AT, is any item, piece of equipment, software program, or product that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of somebody with disabilities, of a person with disabilities. Prosthetics, switches, keyboards, pointing devices, screen readers. A lot of you may have heard of the JAWS screen reader, that kind of robotic voice output program. That's a form of assistive technology. Head trackers, eye gaze, there's a lot. Assistive technology helps people who have difficulty speaking, typing, writing, remembering, pointing, the list could go on. For those of you who don't know where to begin, or think that accessibility might be a moving target or maybe open to interpretation, I've heard that. There are standards. Cvent follows WCAG, WCAG, stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We now follow 2.2 AA. 2.2 was the big one was 2.1. That was updated to 2.2 back in, I think, October of last year. Not a lot from 2.1 to 2.2 was changed. They added, I think, 9 guidelines and maybe took away, I think they took away 1. There's a total of 78 now. I'm sorry, there was a total of 78 in 2.1. Now there's, what I think, 87. So why is accessibility important? First, disabilities impact a large portion of our population, more than a quarter of adults, 27%. In order to engage this group, we need to put accessibility at the top of our priorities. It's the right thing to do. Secondly, as if for the greater good isn't enough, there are laws that mandate accessibility. The ADA I mentioned, Americans with Disabilities Act, and Section 504, the Rehabilitation Act, both of those ensure colleges and universities offer equal access to those with a disability. To reinforce this point, the Department of Justice, together with the Department of Education, published what they call a Dear Colleague letter just this past spring, reiterating the importance of accessibility in post-secondary education. The letter goes one step further. It outlines the enforcement actions that are taken against any institution that's not following these laws. And to quote the letter, the DOJ and DOE call out that there are, quote, lectures, conferences, sporting events, admissions, graduation ceremonies, and other events, much of which is often inaccessible to individuals with disabilities. These are our students. The DOJ and DOE go on to clearly state that they are using their enforcement authority to address inaccessible services, programs, and activities. Do a little digging, you find out they're serious. Here are 2 examples of stories that made headlines last year, including a $240,000 judgment against a university. The third reason accessibility is important is that accessibility helps make the world better for a lot of other people too. There are so many people out there who wouldn't consider themselves as having a disability, but who would benefit from accessible events. A student simply breaks their glasses or forgets them before class. Someone with ADHD has trouble focusing. The 67.3 million US residents who use a language other than English at home. Simply our aging population. They might need video captions, they might need larger font. Or someone with a temporary disability. Think like a student athlete. They play football, they get a concussion, or they break an arm. Knock wood, they don't. Break their arm, they can't use a mouse for the next 6 or 8 weeks. So when you think about engaging your constituents, your students through events, accessibility needs to be at the forefront of your planning. Creating an event that truly engages all your constituents, those with disabilities and beyond, requires accessible experiences. Now let's get into the varying disability types and talk about how you can make your event experiences more accessible to more people. I do want to note that a lot of these, I'll say higher level examples, concepts, some of them are almost silly, but I really at a high level, I want everybody on here to understand accessibility at that kind of core level. So I hope you enjoy it. For starters, Mr. Rogers. This is a letter to Mr. Rogers you can read here. This is from Katie, age 5. He received this in the early 60s. Katie, who is blind, asked Mr. Rogers to say out loud when he was feeding the fish because she couldn't see them and she cried. I just thought it was sweet and want to mention that let's all try to be like Mr. Rogers. So visual disabilities, they could be, I'm blind, fully blind. I might have limited vision and I can see, but not very well. I might be color vision deficient, also known as colorblind. They tend now to say CVD or color vision deficient because it's not like you are colorblind, but you are colorblind or are not colorblind. There are varying degrees. Those numbers are big, by the way. 8% of men have some degree of color vision deficiency, only about 0.5% of women. Or with our aging population, cataracts, glaucoma, age-related macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, it's hard to say. The list goes on. So let's talk about some roadblocks and solutions for people with visual disabilities. I can't see your content, so I use a screen reader or what's called a braille display. A braille display is a keyboard that refreshes a braille with your fingertips so you can read. Excuse me. I'm unable to visually follow the mouse cursor, so I can't use a mouse. So I have to use keyboard-only navigation for everything. This includes mobile devices. I'm unable to see what's happening in videos. I require audio descriptions to understand content. I can't differentiate between red errors from any other text. Remember, 8% of men. So you have to use words to describe errors. Things like first name is required. We'll talk about this in a minute. Notice it can still be read, just can't only be read. I have difficulty seeing small fonts or small controls. You have to avoid them, or I use browser zoom or magnification programs. Let's talk about some links. Here we have some links on the page with text that just says, click here. So what's the problem? Well, if I'm blind, I use a screen reader or a braille display. When I use my keyboard and I press the tab key and I go to the controls on the page, I hear click here. And then the screen reader lets me know it's a link. And then I hit tab and I hear click here, link. I don't know where here is. All I hear is click here. So why not make the links the name of the target page? In this case, I would hear instead of click here link, I would hear register link. And then I would hear create an account link. Oh, that's what I want to do. I want to create an account on this page. So instead of hearing click here and being confused, I want to hear create an account. The same as with the more link. Here's this great article about, what is this, CSN, the Cvent Supplier Network. Shameless plug. All I hear is more. I don't know what I'm getting more of. Why not make it learn more about CSN? So I'm on a page. I'm filling something out. I forget my first name. So when I click submit, the border of the field turns red. As a colorblind user, color vision deficient user, I might not be able to tell the difference between the black and the red. Or also as a screen reader, as somebody is fully colorblind, I'm not alerted that like this box that's outlined changed red. So after the error, It's fine if you want to use red. Like I mentioned before, red is okay. Colors are okay, but not just the color. So in this case, we added text of first name is required underneath the field. So as a user who is not colorblind, I can tell the difference between the black and the red. A user who is colorblind or color vision deficient, the red might not make a difference, but they see first name is required, and that's how they know there's an error. By the way, that text gives a screen reader something to read also. So colored status icons, the good old colored status icons. Here we have you've seen these a million places, our red, yellow, and green. Here it's circles, it's a little simplified. Could be status on a report, could be your comments highlighted in yellow, somebody else's unhighlighted in red. Could be show errors on a page or success message if a file was uploaded properly. Using colors is fine, but not just colors. So this is one of those high level examples, but in this, it was a status report. So, red is bad, green is good. So I changed it instead of just a red circle to a red down arrow. So somebody who's color vision deficient can tell the difference, like, hey, that down arrow is bad. Why? Here it is for somebody who's full colorblind, fully color vision deficient. As you can tell, that red and that green, you can't tell the difference, but with the shapes, you can. And I know that was a little bit silly, but it's not just website or status reports. Here we have name tag, name badges here at a conference, right? You're checking in with your coworkers, your friends. Oh, you're the green group. Cool, me too, right? Color's fine, but just not color. So in this case, you can put it on the front, you can put it on the back, but in this case, we did the word purple. You're the purple group, you're the red group, you're the green group, right? And again, you could put it on the back if you don't like the visual of it. But why this is important, here it is, full colorblind, fully color vision deficient. Your coworker in the green group and you're the purple group, you would never tell the difference. Color contrast ratio is the ratio of text against background. Black text on a white background has a contrast ratio of 21:1, which is the highest ratio possible. I mentioned those WCAG, or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. Those say the text to background for WCAG AA, which is what we follow, should be at least 4.5:1 for normal sized text. 1.2:1, which is shown here, is probably pretty awful for everybody with this kind of yellow text on that bluish green background. Difficult for everybody. I think it's awful on my monitor, but especially for those with vision issues. So for this example, I wasn't sure what was important, if it was the yellow text or that greenish blue background. So I updated it. If the background is the important part, I just chose black text, and then it's 8.7:1. If the yellow text was the important part, because I didn't design this, this page, this website, if the yellow text was important, you'll keep that. And I just did on the color checker, just a much darker green background. Either one is fine, whatever you want as the website creator, both of them are above 4.5. When we create our Cvent products, we try to incorporate as much guidance as possible. Here's a screenshot from this is a Attendee Hub designer with an error that says, and I quote, "This color doesn't meet accessibility guidelines. We should suggest a darker color with higher contrast." It's a built-in feature. Whenever planners pick color with poor contrast, we let them know. We actually now, this page has been slightly updated very recently. Now, if you've used our products in the last couple of weeks, we have now color themes. Color themes, if you have safe color mode, will actually tweak the color a little bit for you. It's pretty cool. I actually really, really like it. Right now, it's only an Attendee Hub based on very, very positive user feedback. We want to roll it in other products like registration in the future. So let's talk about images and something called image alt text. This is literally of those WCAG guidelines. This is 1.1.1. This is the first one. Assistive technology like screen readers, they read text and they identify controls like links. We talked earlier about buttons, but they cannot interpret images. So AT, or assistive technology, will let you know that it's an image, that it's a picture. That's where it stops. It doesn't describe it at all. You have to specify something called alt text or alternative text, so screen readers know how to describe that image to users who are unable to see it. It's not a literal description. Let users know the intent of the image. Context is everything. The big bold blue there. Say that again. Context is everything. I'll talk about this in a second. Less is often more. Users don't need paragraphs about an image. You don't have to go in a ton of detail about it. Just again, the context, the intent of that. Decorative images that are just there to make the page prettier from a visual aesthetic, just mark them up as no alt text. So no alt text, so screen readers ignore those completely. From my page just one slide ago, I added alt of attendee hub theme page showing an error that color contrast is too low. I didn't think it was important that they know it's was it red text on a pink background. That was too much information, so I felt this was enough. And that quote of context is everything, give credit to an organization called WebAIM, stands for Web Accessibility in Mind. I stole that quote. There's a nice little article on alt text. So let's talk about context, and context is everything. This is ragweed, and everybody's going, boo, hiss. So ragweed, that flowering plant that we all hate in the spring, which should be here in another month, yay. On an allergy site, I need to know about pollen and how ragweed can produce, and this is true, 1 billion pollen grains per season. On a TV manufacturer site, excuse me, I need to know about the deep green color since it shows off the color rendering of one of their TVs they're trying to sell. And if this image is just for decorative purposes, just because it's pretty, I don't need to know anything about it. As a blind user, I don't care why that picture's there. It doesn't give me any information. Or if there's already text that describes it on the page, I would add null alt text so my screen reader just completely ignores it. Here's our event designer website, page where you could specify alt text. For this one, that image on the left, the guy there with the hat, this planner chose gentleman looking at laptop viewing virtual event. You know, you don't need to know he has a hat. You don't need to know he has his hand up against the chin. Just that, you know, he's viewing this virtual event on a laptop. That's what the planner did. And that's pretty good alt text. So hearing disabilities, they could be, I'm deaf, I'm fully deaf, unable to hear. I have severe hearing loss and require hearing aids. Or I have mild hearing loss or tinnitus, my ears ring, I have an ear infection, I may have difficulty catching every word you say. Some roadblocks and solutions. I'm unable to hear system prompts. So you have to provide visual clues if you do audio prompts. Thankfully, these are going by the wayside. We don't do as many dings and beeps and bells anymore on websites. I'm unable to hear voices in multimedia presentations. I require captions to understand spoken words. I'm unable to hear relevant sounds in multimedia presentations. You must include sound effects in your captions. I'm unable to communicate verbally in person, during meetings, over your phone to your help desk, during interviews, you name it. So I'm going to require a sign language interpreter, and I want to do again a shout out to our sign language interpreters. And I apologize if I speak too quickly. You may require sign language interpretation, speech to text, mobile apps. We'll talk about mobile apps. I love some fantastic mobile apps out there. So captions. So here's a nice, interesting video about Cvent Connect. And what is the speaker saying? I don't know. I have a hearing disability. Closed captions allow someone who can't hear your content to understand what's being said. It's not just deaf. Think about the last time you were at an airport, you were sitting at a bar, maybe in the airport sitting at a bar, they had the TV on. There's no way you could hear it. You could not understand what was going on. Hopefully they had closed captions turned on. So it's one of those things where captions, like so many other accessibility features, they really do help everybody. So here's a live event, great event, right? Excuse me, same issue. I have no idea what the speaker's saying here. I'm unable to hear them. It could be due to a disability, could be it's just loud. I'm unable to hear what's going on. Not only does this event have live captions, which are great, they also have a sign language interpreter who really is not just the spoken word, but also, as you can see on her face here, and you can see it with our live captioners, the emotion that's exuding. So if the speaker says mad, a sign language interpreter will kind of look mad. I think it's art. I love it. I'll talk about that in a minute in a couple of slides here. So help desk. You have a problem? Pick up the phone, give us a call. What if I can't hear? Phone is fine for users who can hear, can communicate that way, but also other alternatives. Offer your email. In this case, offer email, offer a live chat for those who aren't unable to actually hear to communicate with your help desk. There's some great apps. I love my mobile apps that can help facilitate a conversation with someone who's unable to hear you. On my team, I used to have a team member who was fully deaf. We use Microsoft Translator very effectively. You can start a conversation, there's a little button. So each of you use your own phone, me speaking to him and him typing so we could communicate. This also works for language translation for events like a registration desk. I would strongly encourage you have this pre-installed on your phones if you're running the desk or your help desk worker or the registration desk workers, so they kind of know how to use it, play around with it a little bit. Very effective for somebody who simply speaks a different language. To go back to that sign language interpreter I showed a few slides ago, I want you to think about kind of a book versus a movie and how a movie shows those emotions and shows those details. AI captions are good. They're getting better as they learn. A human typing captions is better, is more accurate. And sign language interpreter, that's really the ultimate because they relate details, emotions, not just the words. Remember though that not all deaf people know sign language, so you also need captions. Captions versus a sign language interpreter, it's kind of that book versus movie analogy. The movie shows those emotions where a book is just text. Remember, for your in-person events, reserve a few front seats for deaf attendees if you have an interpreter. And honestly, even if you don't, if you're relying on captions, still keep some seats in the front and label them as for those who may have difficulty hearing, those who need to see the screen, see the caption, see the sign language interpreter. Because what you don't want, you do the right thing, you have captions, you have an interpreter, you don't reserve the room, and unfortunately they got there late, they might have trouble communicating with their Uber driver, they're sitting all the way in the back, they can't see the interpreter, it's not a good experience. Behind the interpreter, minimize your backgrounds. You don't want them, you don't want the crazy backgrounds, tend not to have them in front of one of your monitors, that could make it very hard to see their hands. And they should be well lit. You should, again, they communicate with their hands, you should be able to see their hands all the time well lit. And there are, I believe now, over 200 different sign languages. So if you're in, American Sign Language, ASL. If you're Britain, there's a British Sign Language, there's a Spanish Sign Language. There's, again, I think over 200. Talk about very briefly about captions, about human captions, a human actually typing it. I read the first couple of sentences on this, and it said, this was the first 3 lines of this slide, where I said AI is good and getting better all the time. Google Captions said, hey, hi is good and getting better, all the count. I'm human, captions are better, sign language is especially helpful. Yeah, so you can see it was okay, but maybe somebody reading it, they would have been a little lost. So let's talk about physical disabilities, like being unable to use a mouse, or can't use a mouse or a keyboard and have to use what is called a sip and puff device. Just being elderly, having tremors, so you lack fine motor control. Thank you. My mouth lacks fine motor control, which can affect mouse use. Or simply, again, go back to the student athletes. They were skiing, they broke their arm. Again, not wood. They're in a cast for the next 6 to 8 weeks, so they can't use a mouse. Some roadblocks and solutions. Unable to use a mouse. You have to ensure that all controls, your buttons, links, radio buttons, checkboxes, form fields, menus, everything is both accessible and usable, and you can visually track focus. This kind of goes out more to your software engineers out there. Lack of keyboard accessibility is by far the #1 accessibility roadblock. I'm unable to perform complex keyboard commands, Control, Alt, Delete, things like that. Really don't use them, avoid them. Those multi-key commands or hotkeys, they used to call them, they're really, again, going by the wayside. Luckily, we don't use them as much. I require space for my wheelchair, my service animal, my white cane, my personal care assistant, etc. You have to consider wheelchair access and space for service animals in the office, during interviews, at your events. So let's give you some examples. We'll start with flyout menus. I mentioned that lack of keyboard accessibility is the #1 accessibility roadblock. It means all controls on the page need to be fully accessible and fully usable with really just the tab key with the keyboard. Again, for you software engineers out there, please pay attention. Flyout menus like this can't just require a mouse. You need to make sure they work with the keyboard, and if possible, add a slight delay. I'm gonna give you an example. Apology for if you can't see me, I'm using my hands, but let's say you're on option 2 and you wanna go to option 2B and you briefly with the mouse cursor brush 3. 3's menu appears, 2's menu is gone. So what do you have to do? You go back to 2 and you very carefully move over to 2A and then back down to 2B. I'm 80 years old. My handshake, I have tremors. That is not going to happen. So I have to use a keyboard. So make sure it works with the keyboard. And again, for those mouse users who still can use a mouse and still visually follow cursor, give a little bit of a delay before 3's menu pop up. So it gives you a little bit of a chance to move over to say 2B and pick it. I'm going to give you all a challenge. We used to say we wanted No Mouse Monday, where it was an entire day. Please do this. No Mouse Monday was on Monday in the accessibility community. I'm not going to use my mouse at all on Monday. I'm going to go to the bank. I'm going to, my bank's website. I'm going to check my PTO balance at work. I'm going to enter my hours at work, everything with no mouse. I realize that that's very difficult. So let's make it No Mouse Lunch Monday. Please try this. Matter of fact, I would love feedback. Pick an hour, a lunch on Monday. Don't use your mouse. Go to your bank, check your bank balance, check your 401k balance, buy something from Amazon, try it without the mouse. I really think it would build empathy for your users. Things like calendar controls, tool tips, these custom drop downs. These controls often have an accessibility issue. So when you're doing your no mouse lunch on Monday, kind of pay attention to these. You might hit some, please try to find a calendar control. You might hit some where simply nothing works, no tabbing, no arrow keys, you're stuck. Which means somebody with a disability, especially keyboard or fully blind user, they can't use that control at all. So check out a couple of situations here. These are hard enough for all of us to navigate. Now imagine a student in a wheelchair trying to get down that hallway with the stacks of paper. Your office is down there. Or an alum with a service animal, or a donor navigating with the white cane trying to squeeze their way around those tables to find a seat. They're not only difficult, they could be completely impossible, and they could be unsafe. So let's talk real quick about cocktail tables. It's a beautiful room. I would like to go there and have some crab cakes and have a glass of wine. Beautiful, right? Tall cocktail tables, beautiful tablecloths on them. What about attendees in wheelchairs? Their drinks are going to end up over their head. So I found these cool little, I even think this might have been Amazon, but these cool little height adjustable cocktail tables, just to give you an option, something to think about. Also, tablecloths can cause issues for users in wheelchairs because they can prevent them from getting close up to the table. If you want to think about it, they get up close, their front wheel hits the tablecloth, rolls over it, pulls it down. Best cases, they get a champagne shower. Worst cases, they get hit in the face with a table. Could be very, very dangerous. I never even thought about this till I was on a call with someone who's in a wheelchair and they mentioned it. It was like an aha moment, like, why didn't I ever think about that? I will also mention that if you do have wheelchair users, you might want to have like some couches or some lower seating, because people in wheelchairs don't want to spend, again, I apologize, I'm doing a visual, but they don't want to spend all day looking up like this, talking to people who might be, 3 or 4 feet over their head. And if they do have limited physical movement, they might just do it with their eyes and they can get eye fatigue. So put some couches or chairs or something lower so they can talk eye level with their people as they share a glass of champagne. So speech or language impairment. Speech doesn't really impact digital accessibility, software accessibility very much, but it will greatly impact your in-person events. Think about a registration desk. So I wanted to give you some examples. I'm unable to speak. I have a speech impediment, so my words are not clear. I have ALS, and I'm losing my ability to speak. Also, that I have a hearing impairment. That also impacts my ability to speak. So some roadblocks and solutions. I have difficulty accessing voice input programs on phone systems and conversational speech input programs like those AI chatbots that we're all using now. So you have to provide options for key entry or just full menu bypass. I have difficulty communicating with help desk phone support. Again, you have to offer help. That's fine, but also offer it in other means: chat, website, mobile app. I can't talk to the people at your registration desk. Beautiful event, I can't register. I use apps. I love my accessibility apps. So voice input, here's our old antique telephone, pick up the cool old phone, describe the purpose of your call. It's fine, but also give them the option to press 1 for whatever option 1 is, not just using voice. So same example, here's our contact us 1-800 number, right? That doesn't help somebody who's unable to speak. So same thing as with somebody who has difficulty hearing, give them other options, give them an email chat, give them an email address, make it a chat, an accessible chat option. And again, just like users who have hearing issues, apps help users who have difficulty speaking. For those of you out there who don't have, or do have any type of like on-site registration, these apps are free. Really, really stress you should have them pre-installed, play around with them in advance. They really will help you one day, I guarantee it. I personally use Translator. This was me. It was an attendee who came to my booth at a conference. She spoke Japanese. I was able to speak in English on my phone. She didn't have the app. She installed it right there on the spot. It took 30 seconds. I spoke in English. She was able to both read and hear voice output in Japanese. She actually, as she was reading this, put her hand to her mouth and went, "It's right." She was so happy. And I was thrilled because we were having difficulty communicating. I wanted to talk about this cool stuff that we have. I was so happy that I was able to communicate to somebody in Japanese. It was awesome. And she instantly felt comfortable, being at my booth. So mental health, intellectual, and learning disabilities. This is our kind of last area. A lot of this borders on usability pretty heavily. I think it's though with speech, I wanted to kind of give some examples. The important thing to remember is that a person without a disability, so without mental health and intellectual or learning disabilities, without those issues, they'll struggle through, say, your website. They'll make it, they'll hate you for it, they'll feel stressed, they'll start sweating, they'll get nervous, but they'll make it. Somebody with a disability, they might not. They might hit a point where their brain's like, "I'm done, we're out." They leave your site. You've just lost somebody who will not register for your conference. So big difference between kind of usability and somebody actually has like a mental health issue using your site. So I'm on the autism spectrum. I experience depression. I have dyslexia. I have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. I suffer from anxiety. So some roadblocks and solutions. And again, I want you to remember this does kind of heavily overlap with just good design, with usability, with good UX. But again, the difference between a person using your site and fumbling through and leaving it, you're going to lose a registrant. So complex websites confuse or overwhelm me. Use simple, easy to use navigation and layouts. Overpowering use of color distracts me. Avoid those crazy, bright, contrasting colors. Use of complex figures can confuse me. Include descriptions and write in plain English. These walls of text, luckily we don't do it anymore. We used to have a screen this big, again, I'm using my hand, but we wanted to completely fill it with pictures and words. Use simple sentences, use bullets, make it easier for me. I often feel overwhelmed. This isn't just website. I often feel overwhelmed at your in-person events. Everybody does. Offer opportunities for smaller groups to chat. Deliver some content online via webinar or on-demand video. We all do this also. I appreciate a quiet space just to recharge. I have a dedicated space that's quiet, comfortable, and calm. Lastly, I'm not comfortable speaking up or asking questions. I was at a conference once where I was a speaker, so I sat all the way in the back, dead last table. Gentleman came up next to me and asked, and I was the only person at this table. He said, "Do you mind if I sit next to you?" I said, "Of course not." I thought he was a speaker because it was a giant room and there were 4 or 5 rows of empty tables. Turns out he was an attendee. He was a former military, had PTSD. He had to sit with the wall behind him. So he was uncomfortable speaking up, asking questions. So with him, it worked great, but other alternatives to communicate, offer online chat, online Q&A through maybe a mobile app so somebody can be in that room. They want to be all the way in the back. They don't want anyone to interact with them at all. They're not happy speaking, but they are happy typing. This is from a CNN report. This was titled, "Mental Health Struggles Are Driving More College Students to Consider Dropping Out," survey finds. This report is from March 2023, so this is now. 40% of undergrad students currently enrolled had considered dropping out in the past 6 months. 20% of adults in the US live with mental illness. Young adults are disproportionately affected. 50% of young adults aged 18 to 24 have reported anxiety and depression symptoms in 2023. These numbers are huge. These numbers are, I think they're staggering. I hope we can help. So I talked earlier about large blocks of text. They can be difficult for anyone, but for some users, they simply cannot process it. It's just too much. So use images, use diagrams to support the text, that some people can read that text and are okay fighting their way through it. Some people, the executive summary might work a little better. Excuse me. For people with dyslexia, luckily we don't use this as much now also, but avoid justified text. Text like this, to me, it looks a little weird. It does the spacing justified instead of being left line or right line. It spreads the spacing out. Somebody with dyslexia can make that very, very hard for them to read. So here, putting too much information in one space, trying to fill that whole screen, it can be an issue. So keep it short, keep it clear, keep it simple. And yes, this does, again, I stress this, does sound a lot like usability or good design, not necessarily accessibility, but for users with mental health, intellectual, and learning disabilities, this may be the difference between them being able to use your site or not. I actually saw this once on a site. It was awful. I went through this whole site and filled out a whole bunch of stuff and clicked submit, and it said, "You have errors in submission." No field names, absolutely no context. It was up to me to kind of hunt around to try to find the field that I had missed. It had some other issues on it, but this was one of them. Why not let users know exactly what errors they made so they can easily identify it, they fix it, and they move on. In this place, instead of hearing, "You have errors in submission, thank you very much. Please correct the following errors, last name is required." And it's also a bullet list, so if I messed up 3 times, I might hear or see, last name is required, first name is required, address is required. I go to them, I fix them, I move on. So here we are in a workflow, okay? I'm a couple pages in, I'm 2 pages in, let's say, right? And I have no idea how much more work I have to do, but I know my brain is starting to hit its limit. I'm just about done. And there's a next button. It gives me no context of how far I am in this workflow. I like this. This says, instead of next button, step 3 of 4 button. So my brain says, you know what? You're halfway through. You've made it through steps 1 and 2. You have enough in you to make it through steps 3 and 4 without needing a rest. I love this. It's not the only way to do it. I just thought this was a good one. You can have steps at the top of the page. You can have a progress bar. What do they call the breadcrumb cookies or whatever it is? Anything to let people know how far along you are in this relatively complicated workflow and how much more you have. Users are going to appreciate knowing. So in case they get anxious, they can know, well, okay, I'm halfway through, I can make it, or maybe I need to go take a break and I'll come back. For your in-person events, here's some things that might help out. Things like low sensory rooms. These used to be called quiet rooms, or that had a little bit of a negative connotation. Now we call them low sensory rooms. Same thing, a nice quiet place to relax. Rest areas, break time between sessions. Don't forget nice neutral lighting. and not overpowering sound. Fidget devices, this is really interesting. I'm a certified usability analyst, and I was at a conference, a training class once, and the professor had pipe cleaners on the table, and immediately we sit down, we start playing with pipe cleaners and, you know, making flowers and all that stuff. And as he spoke about it, he said research showed that things like fidget devices actually increase participation, or participant attention. I just thought it was interesting, so I wanted to put it here, because clearly I can get very fidgety. To help those who may feel uncomfortable at larger events, offer a mobile experience that gives attendees a sense of what the event will be like ahead of time. Things like video clips from past events, maybe maps of the building of the event space. Mobile experiences can offer things like virtual chat with attendees, the ability for attendees to plan or understand their schedule ahead of time. During the event, the apps facilitate, I mentioned earlier about like virtual chat. The guy with PTSD who sat next to me in the back of the conference loved this. Virtual chat, question and answers. Some even have events you can do like gaming to make people feel more included. Try to make your events feel smaller for attendees. Some of these events are thousands and thousands of people. Opportunities to schedule one-on-ones or small group like-minded meetings, they go a long way. Finally, not everybody needs to be in person. Considering using webinars or on-demand videos before and post-event. Select certain speakers or topics for a virtual meeting, or maybe hybrid only. That can be the best of both worlds. Now I know mental health, I didn't cover a whole lot. Honestly, it's a pretty new area, so maybe you know, a year from now I can have another one of these and kind of give you an update. And with that, that's the end of the training part. If you don't mind, give me maybe 2 minutes. I'm going to steal a couple of minutes here to talk about what we're doing at Cvent. VPATs, or Voluntary Product Accessibility Templates, that's the document companies use to state their level of accessibility. Once filled out, technically it becomes an ACR, or Accessibility Conformance Report, but you clients never ask for ACRs, you always ask for VPATs. That's what we call them. These are made for you, for our clients, and they're often mandatory, especially with government and higher ed. There are laws that state if you use federal funds, you have to, among other things, be accessible, and you have to do that by reviewing a VPAT. They're created per product, so one for registration, one for attendee, well, one for Attendee Hub Web, one for Attendee Hub Mobile. Our VPATs are created by an independent third-party accessibility firm. I personally have written VPATs, especially I used to do a lot of federal work. I wanted ours to be fully transparent, fully clear and honest and open. So I pay an accessibility firm to audit our products. Of the roughly 1,500 event software companies, I have found none that offer VPATs that are independently audited. So if they say our products are accessible, it's true. It's not me, it's them. Talk to your account reps, and we have about a dozen VPATs and counting. We can get them in your hands. So far, we have VPATs for these 12 different products here. Clearly, the emphasis is on attendee-facing products. That's simply a numbers game. The number of potential attendees with a disability is way larger than, for example, a planner. We do about 2 to 4 VPATs about every 6 months, so like 4 to 6, 4 to 8 a year, something like that. Again, happy to get them. They're publicly available. Happy to give them out to anybody. We don't put them on our website. We have them go through your account rep, and they'll get them to you. It's kind of nice to see that we have made a lot of effort around accessibility. We're being recognized as an industry leader. We've had some great interviews, some articles written about us, won a couple of very prestigious national awards, things like Meetings, Meetingsnet Changemakers and Meetings Today Trendsetters. This is a quote from one of those awards. This was Meetings Today saying that it's time for the events industry to admit that they have not been fully inclusive when it comes to people with disabilities, and it's time to change. Lastly, National Federation of the Blind did considerable research into event software providers. They concluded that Cvent, and this is a quote, was the only realistic option when it came to accessibility. They specifically called out, not only did we have completed VPATs, but they were independently audited. And they knew the company that does our VPATs is called TPGI. They knew of them, and they knew they did good work. Having the largest and oldest organization led by the blind choose our products was quite an honor. And with that, I thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Susan, I think back to you.
Stephen, as always, your presentations are absolutely eye-opening, and you can count on the fact that I will take you up on the offer to come back in maybe a year and talk more about mental health and accessibility for sure. This concludes the formal part of our presentation. One final thing though, before you sign off, Cvent is offering anyone who fills out the form and participates in a demo a $100 Amazon gift card. The link is in the chat, so if you're interested in a demo of Cvent, now is absolutely the time to sign up. Finally, though we will go off camera, we will stay on for a few more minutes to answer any additional questions that you might have. Please go ahead and type those into the Q&A box, and we'll be sure to stick around and answer them. Thank you so much for participating, and have a wonderful day. Take care.